So sometimes my dog walking adventures lead me to dogs and making dog videos. Other times my clients have holiday guests that are actual musicians and dating their daughters. And this guy, Gen, is no exception. So and when you get introduced and find out the guy's a musician and has quite a storied past, it's an opportunity for a good conversation. So, Gen, thank you for giving me some time here.
Thank you, Ken.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you and see you. I enjoyed your video and learning a little bit about your style of music, and what really caught my eye and ear was field recording and people taking stuff that they've recorded and sampling it and turning it into music, and quite cool. How'd you get started in all this?
Thank you, Ken. Long drink to think about my answer. So there's the family, the backstory of the album. Well, first of all, my name is Gen. I make music under the name Essvus. That's Essvus. 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 And my new album is called What Ails You, and it's out on New Amsterdam Records. It's out now. It's on all the platforms digitally. And if I were to go into the backstory of the album, I could talk about the sonics of the album, and I could talk about the personal history of the album.
Both.
Yeah, the personal history of the album is a little heavy, which is why I got this. So it always takes me a second to kind of go through it. Okay, so I'm the son of a cult leader. My dad runs a cult. He's a cult leader. And there's going to be some ums and pauses you're going to have to cut. So that's where I was raised. But I grew up in America. So I was born in Japan. I came to America when I was 4 years old. So I had this weird thing where I would go to school, and in school in Hawaii, I went to like a prep school, right? And I'd come home, and it was a cult at home. My dad is what you would call like a narcissistic abuser. Growing up, I didn't quite, square all that stuff. I was raised to believe that he was, like the closest thing to God or Buddha. It was a Buddhist cult, but that he couldn't do any wrong, and everything that he said was right, and he had a lot of personality issues and insecurities and so on that were like kind of pushed on me. Certainly my mom suffered a lot as well, and
Your story is already hitting home. It sounds exactly like mine. I worked for my dad in his family business till he fired me right before COVID.
Ooh, wow.
And was a narcissist and was harsh on my mom, and so I think we got some common ground here. Go.
Yeah. It's weird because I was like raised to like to call, I would be like, oh, this person's my auntie, this person's my uncle, but they were my dad's disciples. They would work for my dad, and like they would be like the eyes and ears of the Kraken, that he was, and it's he was not a good person. My mom is, I think, in the 5th year right now of divorcing him, and I could kind of get into the weeds of that, but maybe we should cover the album stuff first. Right?
All right.
So
how did all the trauma lead you to music? Music heals, and that's probably why you do it.
Right, sure. That is a very good question. Thank you very much, Ken. That helps me kind of organize my thoughts.
My job. That's my job as an interviewer.
Thank you. So I was exposed to music from a young age, but I didn't really like it for a very long time. As I like to say, I grew up Asian, so they made me play piano. I never practiced piano, so I wasn't very good at it. And a story I like to bring up in interviews such as this is when I was a kid, I was doing a piano recital, and I didn't really like enjoy doing the performance. And I used to think, I remember distinctly thinking at this piano recital, hey, I wish I could just like, why do I have to perform this for an audience? Why can't I just hang up my music on a wall? You know, like you would do a painting or something, you know? I wouldn't have to do it. You could just look at it and be like, oh, there it is, you know? And I realized in a funny way, that's kind of where I put myself, because I now make electronic music. And electronic music, we're talking about fixed media. We're talking about something that you can press play on, which is about as close as you can get to hanging your music up on a wall, short of art installation, which I've also done at Cal Arts. But yeah, so initially I started doing piano. I didn't practice a lot, but I did that. And then I did choir for 4th grade. I was so bad at choir, they made me take, I was singled out of the choir full of elementary schoolers to take remedial lessons. Wow. Because I was that bad. And then the year after that, I did cello. I started doing cello because my dad told me to do cello, and I thought it was like a saxophone because my dad would talk about how much he thought saxophones were cool. So I thought I was gonna get like a saxophone. I show up to school, they give me a stringed instrument. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I guess that's what I'm doing. Huh? So I did cello for a while. I wasn't like super good at cello either. When Guitar Hero, for reference, I'm 30 right now. When Guitar Hero came out, that would be in the late 2000s, I think.
That late, wow.
Right, it would be late 2000s Guitar Hero came out. I had a friend of mine who was really good at Guitar Hero, and I was saying, yeah, if you're going to play Guitar Hero, you might as well learn how to play guitar. And I was like, well, maybe I should learn how to play guitar. And around this time, I also, I didn't really listen to music for the most part. And my mom one day bought this little pink iPod. And I found it. I was like, Mom, this is like an iPod. She's like, yeah. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Can I have this? My mom was like, no, I need it for work and stuff. I was like, thanks, Mom, I'll take it. So I took the iPod. And I was like, well, I knew that music went on the iPod. I didn't know about music. So I said, I don't know. And at the time, I knew other kids liked Halo 3, the video game, back when the Xbox was very popular. And I would put Halo 3 soundtracks, like individual tracks they bought off the iTunes store. And I was like, well, I need more songs. So I learned more about music by filling up that iPod. By filling up, like, okay, well, it's like I have the container and now I need the music. And that's how I started learning more about music. I had a kind of a musical background. I mean, I did, but I wasn't really interested in it until I got the device that actually helped me connect to music. And it all kind of makes sense because the aspects of music that I wasn't as connected to was the physical performance part. But as it turns out, I did like listening to music. I'd have my headphones in, I'd listen to my iPod on the way to school and stuff. And the late 2000s would be a lot of like emo pop rock type stuff, and I listened to that. I was kind of like a nerdy kid. I listened to some anime music, maybe some video game music, I don't know, that kind of stuff as well. I remember Daft Punk was already pretty popular then. This would be before Get Lucky kind of brought them to the real American mainstream. But, I had maybe like a Discovery by Daft Punk or something. And as I started filling up that iPod and I play guitar and stuff like that, I learned more about music. And the more I learned about music, the more I liked it. And, ums and ahs, sorry.
You're doing great.
Yeah, thank you.
What grabbed you about music? What made you like music? Was it just that it was sound like video games, or was it hitting your head and your heart, or? Yeah,
I suppose. I mean, if you've been a teenager who listened to music, you kind of get it. It's like, oh, hey, it kind of speaks to you. It was, I don't know, it has, like an emotional resonant quality, but also it could be kind of visual sometimes. I feel like I don't have like proper musical visual like synesthesia, but I feel like sometimes music it's hard to explain. It's almost like physical, it's like it's almost visual. I do have like I think they call it like color grapheme synesthesia, where like letters correspond to colors, but nothing like that with music. And growing up, I used to think of myself as being like untalented in music. I was like, oh, other people around me are more talented. But for whatever reason, I liked listening to records, and I said, well, I would also like to make music. Every guitar kid would also like to do that. But, guitar, you're still playing instruments and stuff. Nothing, that's not terrible. But when, you may remember, around 2010, 2011, I believe at the time, 23-year-old man, very short with a strange buzz cut haircut, named Skrillex dropped an EP called Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, which took the mainstream by storm. If we all remember, Taylor Swift mentioned, made a track called We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together. That was like a dubstep thing. You can tell that it like had this
influence.
Kind of mainstream. Yeah. Like people... It's weird because I think for a long time it wasn't like a really big seller, but everyone knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what like the sound of clubs were. Kids knew about it, and it was like, I heard it and I was like, wow, what is this music? And how do you make it as well? So that's when I heard about DAWs and Ableton Live, and I ended up going with Ableton Live. Near the end of high school, I got Ableton Live, and I started making electronic music. And I'm going to kind of relate this to a meme I saw on the internet, where they say all video games are either menus or parkour. And so, like Mario is parkour, right? Tetris,
what's that word mean?
Parkour is it's like that French sport where you run. I guess you like run around urban terrain. I guess I don't know. You jump off of stuff. Yeah. And so it's either menus or like running around or like doing an action. And so I guess in that and the joke is that it's like, it's overly reductive, but it's like, oh, Mario's parkour, or like Pokemon as menus, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when I think about music or just like activities in general this way, I think I'm just more of a menus person than a parkour person, which is why I liked music production, because I wouldn't have to just play instruments. I could approach music in a sort of menus way instead of a parkour way, which is, playing instruments, you have to like do a physical activity and do it exactly the correct way. I prefer being able to take my time.
And editing and making it sound perfect.
Yeah. So electronic music appealed to me, and in the beginning I was one of many youths around the end of the 2000s, beginning of the 2010s, who wanted to be like the next Skrillex. There were quite a lot of us, some more successful than others. But as I went to college in NYU, and in NYU, this was my first time, being in New York, and I learned more about. Up until then, my main music diet was like rock, hard rock, the kind of rock that they would talk about on like the Rolling Stones, that kind of thing, or like maybe a Japanese equivalent, because I'm Japanese, right? EDM and maybe some nerdier stuff, but like, anime.
Come on, what's nerdier than EDM?
Well, honestly, that's an interesting thing to say, because one of the things I learned about EDM during my time in college was that EDM, because there's a sort of association, especially at the time, of like frat bro, like very white, very like frat bro party thing with the EDM, and it was like, this actually comes from music that is much more black and much more queer and underground, and the EDM that I've been exposed to in a lot of ways was a much more whitewashed, commercialized, mainstream version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And including, for example, I remember Skrillex released an EP called Leaving. And at the time, I remember thinking, like, why does it sound like this? It's a little kind of low-key, like, what's going on? And it's like, okay, well, even the term dubstep, which was so famous back then, and maybe still is now, where does that come from? And it's like, oh, like learning about the roots of dubstep from like dub music, two-step. Where does dub music come from? That comes from like reggae.
Right.
And it comes from the way like dub producers would take reggae tracks, they'd make them instrumental and bass heavy, and they would edit it to be this like thing that would push out massive subs on sound systems in Jamaica. And there was this whole culture, two-step, the way that like evolved in Britain. And you listen to Skrillex today, he sounds a lot more like that. And it's like, oh yeah, where is he right now? He's in Britain, right? And it's like learning the roots of this. And it's like, well, I think Skrillex knew the roots. I think he did, and I think that's also part of the reason why he's in Britain now. And the way, if you hear the new Skrillex stuff, the way it kind of sounds like his newer stuff, but also a lot of the UK influences come through a lot more directly. But also, I think a lot of kids, maybe in America at the very least, didn't quite know where a lot of the music came from. And it's very easy, I think, to stay in that sort of like commercialized, like very, that type of lane if you want to. But thankfully I was exposed to a bunch of different stuff. Also, very crucially, I got into hip-hop in New York. I started listening to hip-hop and learning about the ways people would like collage sounds and do different interesting stuff, and the whole lineage of that, because I had kind of just ignored it growing up. I think definitely part of it was like my dad's disdain for a lot of that type of music. I think, the way he talked about other people as well, maybe I should tie this back to my upbringing with my dad and the cult and all that. My dad's massively racist. Of course he's racist against black people. He is a Japanese nationalist, so he's also very racist against like Korean people. Like I remember him telling me like, hey,
I was shocked by that. I worked with a bearing company that was owned by Japanese, and I won over the plant manager, like I told you, by going in early. That was the same plant. And the Japanese owner of the company came to really like me and came out here and toured our factory. And the engineer I worked with was Korean. And he called me up one day and said, I'm leaving my job. It's been great working with you. I'm like, why are you leaving? You're shooting to the top of your company. He goes, well, us Koreans are the hillbillies of Asia in the Japanese people's eyes. And he said, I've risen as high as a Korean person is allowed to rise in a Japanese-owned company. That blew my mind. This was 20 years ago, but still.
I mean, like during World War II, we colonized them. Like that does come from somewhere. And I'm not saying like all Japanese people are like my dad. I don't think that is true. My dad is, again, he's a cult leader. He is unique in certain aspects, but I do think the kind of like entrenched like racism and like those aspects of like nationalism. Like Japan is still at the very end of the day like a pretty conservative country in many aspects. And, that shows up in, I'd like to believe, maybe not everyone, but some people are definitely really like that. And my dad, like I remember him telling me, like, don't do worse than a Korean at school. I'm like,
wow.
And stuff like that. And it was one of those things where it's like, I think I've talked about, like, slightly earlier in this interview, about how at home I was in a cult, and at school I went to, like, a prep school,
which is like a cult.
Well, in its own way, but like it's like America, and it's Hawaii's like a Democrat state, and that kind of thing. But like it'd be this thing where like my dad would prep me on like how to talk about Japan, how Japan totally didn't do anything wrong in World War II. He'd like prep me with like speeches ready to go to school. Like he'd like fucking cut the swear words, I guess. I don't know.
Oh no, I've got NC-17 rating on the channel.
But my dad would like coach me on like what to say at school, and I'd go to school. But then like I would also take the stuff I hear at school back to my dad, and that would get my dad mad. I'm kind of like playing the ping pong ball between two sides of this conversation, and both sides are mad at me more for that. But my definitely also like my dad says like reggae is like gay, it's like ugh, it's like vomit. I'm like, I think like oftentimes racism, you kind of read between the lines. You're like, that's because it's black people, and it's like I don't know, like I feel like a lot of like learning about more culture. I'm not saying that like it's a weird kind of place to talk about, but it's like I feel like if you want to learn more about other peoples and other cultures and stuff, you widen your perspective. And I feel like I'm not saying that people who, like certain music, like I like hip hop, I can't be racist. That's not what I mean. But like, I don't know, like it's slightly two different perspectives, two different worlds, and it is weird to sort of have like this idea. Is my face turning really red, by the way? Okay.
No, you're good.
Okay. Of like, oh, my dad can't say or do no wrong. And on the other hand, be like, maybe we need to like learn to respect people, and also like I remember when my dad told me that thing about like you can't do worse than Korean kids. I was like, that's like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? But on the other hand, it's like I grew up in a way where it was like, well, even if my dad is wrong, he's right. It's like if he points at if he points at a cow and he says it's a chicken, somehow he's right. It was that kind of. It's hard to explain, but
control.
It does. I've had enough alcohol. Can I say something controversial?
Sure, go for it.
The interview is like egging me on, Ken. No, but it does kind of remind me of sometimes I hear the way like Christians who are kind of progressive a little bit talk about how in the Bible they'll be like, oh, the Bible will say this, but actually that's metaphorical. You know what I mean? That kind of like there's like a switch there where it's like, oh, this is mentioned, but actually that's metaphorical. Like it still has to be true because it's in the Bible. You know what I mean? That's the way I treated like everything my dad said, if that makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, that has like, well, I think that's wrong, but it has to be right because my dad said it. That kind of thing. And it was this.
It's called following the gospel.
Yeah. It was a strange way to grow up. But yeah, like I learned more about the music. I did my best.
So did the music allow you a pathway to think on your own, or to rebel, or to react?
I think I don't know if it gave me a path to rebel or whatever, as much as like it gave me support. I think it helped me learn about the world. On my own terms, let's say, I'm digging into because I got into Warp Records a lot, which is UK 90s, a lot of it from 90s onwards, even till now. And a lot of experimental electronic music comes from essentially British people hearing stuff that came from black people in Chicago and Detroit, house and techno from there, and then flipping it to something weird there, which I think echoes the way British people listen to black rock and roll, black blues musicians.
Going back to the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. And then you hear the British people, it's definitely, I think there's a parallel there. But, and then now here I am in America, kind of importing that. And I was a big fan of Flying Lotus, who is a hip hop producer, but also an electronic music producer. And he would do all these music, complicated stuff with all these different roots, related to Alice Coltrane and all that. Free jazz, and I definitely expanded my listening habits a lot more during college, and a lot of I feel like my music education was done going to, if you've been in New York, there was a record store called Other Records that went away while I was in New York. I went to the last ever day Other Music was open, but it was a great record store right by NYU. I could go there and check out records every day, here's a new Thundercat record or whatever, and I miss that store. That store was pretty cool. But there were Generation Records a little south of Washington Square Park, and going to all those places. So, I'm expanding my listening habits, making stuff that's a little bit more niche or a little bit more underground, as I incorporate all these new influences, new to me, influences to my work, which originally came from hard rock and EDM stuff. And I studied philosophy at NYU. And by the end of college, I could figure out that, I don't really want to become a philosopher. Originally, I thought I was going to be a scientist, but I couldn't cut it. And I realized in retrospect, science was one of those things where I like science, but I thought science was going to be my life's passion, I think, because that's what my dad kind of wanted out of me. He wanted me to sort of live a career where I could get the kind of social and academic respect that he never got. And, because he's a cult leader, he's not, and a pretty niche cult leader at that. He hasn't gotten a lot of mainstream appeal. He hasn't gotten, backing from like scientific people, obviously. So I think he wanted me to be that kind of person. And once I gave up on becoming a scientist, I think I went for philosophy, honestly, because I was like, well, that sounds important. My dad would approve of that. So I became a philosophy major, and I was like, oh, I'll become an important philosophy professor or whatever, and that will finally, make me a valuable human being, because that's how I saw myself. And still, sometimes I will admit, I still struggle to see myself and to see my own value as a human being.
We all do.
But I mean, it was definitely a little bit extra because of like the way my dad would talk about, like, I think in my dad's world there are great important people and then people who don't matter. You know what I mean? Which is the kind of mentality I think someone has if they hate other people. And my dad definitely hates other people. And I think in many ways he hates himself. But, he has to tell himself that he's a great man because he's very insecure, And I studied philosophy. And I hope it's okay. This is like taking the long...
Don't worry. There's people's stories are what I like capturing. And we've all gone down different roads and different paths for different reasons. And reflecting on it, when it turns into art, that's great, and so your story is not fat, it's not wasted, and it's keep going, dude.
Thank you. Is my face turning red? Not really. Is it just the lighting? I can feel myself getting warmer and warmer.
It could be the alcohol.
It could be the alcohol. All right. But yeah. So after I finished college, I, as they say, no one's hiring at the philosophy factory. So I can convert it to a job.
As a philosophy history major, I agree with you.
Yeah. They'll tell you, hey, philosophy majors are the highest earning majors, blah, blah, blah. And then they won't, they'll hide from you the fact that what's really happening is that a bunch of philosophy majors go into law and they make a lot of money. But if you just go into philosophy, it's a little different. After college, I didn't quite know what I was doing, and I figured, well, I'll go to Musicians Institute, which was like, it's kind of like a rock and roll school, like factory school. It's like a trade school, basically, in LA, and I had gone there for summer school before, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll go there, I'd gone there for guitar back when I was in middle school or high school or whatever, but this time around I was going for like a independent artist program that they had just started up as a certificate program. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'll do that. And so I went there for that for like a year, which was pretty cool. And then I graduated around the end of 2019, and I said, well, what am I doing? I don't know. And then of course, COVID, the pandemic hit. And it was at the very beginning of the pandemic, I got into an argument with my dad about something or the other. It was about like I was criticizing like his response to the pandemic or whatever. Because I'm like, you're a cult leader, you got to be more responsible, blah, blah, blah. And, my dad, he takes everything, well, I didn't call him a cult leader.
Okay.
I hadn't really come to terms with that, but, I was like, well, you lead a lot of people, blah, blah, blah. And, one of the things my dad does is take every criticism extremely personally. So he was like, you must hate me, blah, blah, blah. Your mother has made you hate me, blah, blah, blah. I'm cutting ties with you. I never want to speak to you again, that kind of thing. And this was a few weeks into March of 2020. And of course, immediately I was like, oh my God, my dad's like, cut ties with me. Like, I started to freak out. I was like, oh, I'm so, I got to tell him, like, I'm so sorry. And then I realized this is a tactic, right? Cutting ties with me puts me in a position where I have to go down groveling to him. And that, once the synapse is connected there, I was like, oh, this was manipulative, what he did to me. And then I said, what else has he been doing that was manipulative to me? And then it all just kind of came down. I was like, oh, it was all manipulation. So much insults and, negative stuff that he said, I was like, oh, they're like manipulative tactics that he did to try to make me act, the way he wanted me to act, become the person he wanted me to be, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of when I realized that I had grown up in a cult. It took me a long time. I was 25 when the pandemic hit, and it was only at the age of 25 that I realized, wait, I've been lied to about my life the whole time. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. Thankfully, thankfully I did realize that. Maybe it would have been better earlier, but hey, some people can go their whole lives not understanding the
reality
situation. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad I was able to get out at the very least. And like a year later, my dad started sending me emails about how my mom's a whore or whatever. And he's like, did you read my email? And it's like, I thought you cut ties with me, man. You said you cut ties with me, but like no contact, obviously. Like it's like I know if each person's situation is different, but if you can go no contact with your abusers, I imagine that is for the best, and that is what I've been doing. But during the pandemic, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing again. So I applied to CalArts because I'd heard about CalArts when I was at Musicians Institute, and that was the only school I applied to for grad school. I was like, I don't know, I guess I should go to grad school. I don't know. So I applied to CalArts. I really late, like I think I sent in my application in like May, and I got in June, and then fall of 2020 I was studying experimental composition. I was studying composition and experimental sound practices at CalArts, and that was pretty special because being in California, I didn't really have a community. I knew some people from Musicians Institute, but that school is a lot more kind of mainstream facing. The people who teach electronic music at Musicians Institute, they kind of know ball. They know what's going on, but a lot of the students there are into they're there to be pop stars or be like rap stars or EDM guys. They don't necessarily know a lot of the deeper stuff that goes on, and the teachers knew, and sometimes they talk to me like, oh yeah, the students like they don't know what's going on. I'm like, I get it. I used to be like that at one point, but being at CalArts, it was very nice because I wasn't the most experimental person in the room by like a wide margin anymore. People were always doing weirder stuff, and I feel like it's as someone who artist, creative, etc., it helps to sort of be in an environment where people are doing weirder and weirder stuff than you, because you don't get stuck in that position of, oh, like I'm making music and other people don't get what I'm doing. It's like, oh no, people get it. Like if they don't get it, they still like roll with it. And it also helped me kind of build a community, like get to know more people in CalArts and be like, oh, I'm from CalArts, and lots of interesting people making interesting art from that school, for sure, music and otherwise. That was very fruitful.
Is that when you started performing?
Like electronic music, I performed a little bit before. I still don't perform a ton yet. This coming year, 2026, I would like to perform more electronic music, but it's weird to perform electronic music sometimes just because I'm making it for I'm making it for like an exported final track. It's not like a band where you can like rehearse a song, go to the studio and record the song the way you rehearsed it, but also you play live the way you rehearsed it. It's like you're doing like editing on like a computer, and it's like, how do you convert what you did, the work you did there, to a live performance?
It would be very hard. I mean,
yeah,
miming almost.
Yeah, it's I think I've over the years sort of figured out like a better way to make that work, but I did definitely do some performances there and things like that. But after that, once again, I got out of CalArts. I didn't know what I was doing, and I saw this program. I know it's just like school after school after school, but I saw this program online called Composers Lab by a record label called New Amsterdam. We're finally getting to the record. where it was like a Zoom workshop, but it was for like experimental artists who were like musicians who are like coming up. And I was like, oh, hey, that's kind of me, maybe I'll apply for that. And I applied for that like a while ago. And then I got an email earlier this year saying, hey, would you like to participate in Composers Lab? I almost missed the email. Very happy that I didn't. I was like, oh, what is this? I don't know. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Oh, this is like an important email. So I responded and I said yes, and I did the program. New Amsterdam, for those who don't know, is it was founded, I believe, by Judd Greenstein, William Bertel, and Sarah Kirkland Snyder, who are three people who kind of came from like classical backgrounds, classically trained backgrounds, but they wanted to make music that didn't fit into the conservatory boundaries, which reflects a lot of people who I also met at CalArts. Lots of people at CalArts had conservatory backgrounds, but didn't want to, just keep doing Beethoven over and over again. And they wanted to, incorporate like the lived-in reality of like the music they lived in, grew up with, and liked, along with the training that they had. And in that sense, New Amsterdam and CalArts had some similarities there. And there were some records from New Amsterdam, like William Bertel's Spiritual America, which is one of my like top 10 favorite albums, but they've released a whole bunch of other ones. Some friends I knew back in my NYU days performed on this record called Cityscapes by Shout House, which I would also recommend people check out if you want to hear like a fusion of like classical music, hip hop, jazz, and like a very New York sound way. But that record sounds very good as well. It was very beautiful. I was playing it for my girlfriend Mary the other day, right before I came to Ohio for Christmas, and Mary, you liked it a lot.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's a good album.
Yeah, Cityscapes by Shout House. Yeah, so I knew about the record label, and for me it was like, wow, this is, to me, it's like New-Am, it's not very well known, I understand, but for the people who know New-Am, they do hold it in high regard, I feel like, like it's, I first heard about New Amsterdam from, I think, Roomful of Teeth, which is an a cappella group, and Carolyn Shaw, who's like one of the Pulitzer, like I think the youngest or one of the youngest Pulitzer Prize winners in music. Like she's involved in that, and at the time I don't listen to as much Kanye anymore for obvious reasons, but a number of them had worked with Kanye West, and which was like a big deal. If you existed 5-10 years ago, you'd understand. But yeah, like Roomful of Teeth, and like very, very good groups associated with New Amsterdam. Classical adjacent, but also jazz and other stuff, as I mentioned, hip hop and all sorts of things. And I attended their workshop. I said, cool, this sounds interesting. I'd like to kind of reconnect with that feeling of like learning and talking to other artists, and stuff. And William Bertel, I was like, wow, maybe I'd even be able to talk to William Bertel, whose record Spiritual America I really do love. That people should definitely check out. But I got to attend that. I did get to talk to William Bertel, and along with a bunch of other people there who were very, very talented. And it was, especially after leaving CalArts, I'd kind of been missing a sense of, like immediate artistic community. Like I knew people in the area in California, but I wouldn't hang out with them all the time, And it was like, oh no, this is cool. This is like interesting to talk to people. And a few weeks before that program, because they do it like they do it like every season or whatever. They do it 3 or 4 times a year. They were like, hey, this year we're starting a new initiative where we're taking album submissions from people who participated in Composers Lab right now or in the past, because they've been running it for a while now. I think they've been running it pre-COVID. So, for a number of years. And it's like, we're going to take album submissions from like up and coming young musicians and who participated. And we're going to put out 2 albums this year from Composers Lab participants. And I said, that's really cool. And then they said later in that email, they said, due dates in like, what, 2 weeks? Was it? A week and a half?
Wow.
And I said, uh-oh. So I had an album half finished for years It was going to be music that I made after the pandemic happened, after I started going to CalArts. And it was half finished. It was half finished for years. And I was like, oh, I'll get it done eventually. And I guess I sort of ignored it during this conversation. But, after, near the end of college, after college, I went through, a period of deep depression. And definitely part of it was my dad didn't want me to do music, and I really internalized a lot of that stuff. So a lot of self-hatred about myself as an artist, as a musician. The idea that I was that my music, because it wasn't art music, it wasn't institutionally supported types of music. I thought it was inherently less valuable. I thought my work was inherently less valuable. I thought I was inherently less valuable as a person because I was doing music instead of something like philosophy that my dad would have approved. So I had a lot of these negative thoughts internalized, and it took me a long time to try to process them. Maybe in a way I'm still processing them, to this day. But, when you have those kinds of ideas in your head, it's very hard to be productive. And I mean, to this day, it's hard for me to be productive with music the way I think I used to be when I was a lot more carefree about it all. But because of that, I've had an album half finished for 5 years plus, and I was like, oh.
It kicked your butt to get it done, didn't it?
Right. Well, it was okay, I have a week and a half to finish an album, and I was like, I don't know if I should do this. It seems at first I was regretting just how much more work I could have gotten done if I'd been more productive, and then I said, well, I should take advantage of the opportunity. I would regret it anyway if I don't submit. So I had an album that was not finished for years, and in a week and a half it was done. I had to, there were tracks that weren't finished that I was like, oh, I'll put on the album. Some of those I polished up very, last minute, which, I'm glad my girlfriend Mary likes at least one of those tracks, Mold Sporing. But a bunch of other tracks also that were going to make it on the album, maybe I had to cut because I couldn't quite bring it up to par at the time. And also, when I was at Musicians Institute, I had a 4-track EP that I was going to release with a label that one of the teachers had. They were, I was at Musicians Institute, the teacher was like, hey, would you like to release your music on my label? I said, cool. And then it just got delayed and delayed and delayed. COVID hit, and he just kind of ghosted me. And so that, thankfully, in the legal documents, there was what they call it, an exit clause, a release clause. If it wasn't released in 2 years or whatever, I'd get my rights back. So I was like, okay, I didn't want to release my old music pre-pandemic to this record, but I was like, you know what? I do need to make the album a full-length album, and the music they fit the flow and the theme of the record. I'm like, I think it'll work. And so I put together, those would be the first 3 tracks of my album, What Ails You. And I finished a 9-track album by the end of a week and a half. I submit it, and I hear back a month later. Well, I'm told this is the day you'll get an email about your new release. I don't get anything, and I'm like, oh, well, okay, that's a little disappointing, but I told myself, no, I'll just take more time polishing my album, etc., etc. And later that day, I actually do get the email. I was like, oh, okay, great. I called my girlfriend at the, when that happened. I was like, I didn't get the email. I'm disappointed, blah 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 blah. And then Mary, you were being very nice about it. And then later in the day, I was like, oh, I actually got the email. They were just late, and I was like, yay. So that's what I've been doing this year. Once again, the album is called What Ails You by Essvus. That's Essvus from New Amsterdam Records. And as part of this initiative, I don't know if I mentioned, 2 albums came out this year. So alongside mine came out Zeely Brown's album, The Apocalypse is Not the End, but the Unveiling, which is, I'll say that again, Zeely Brown's, that's Zeelie Brown's album, The Apocalypse is Not the End, but the Unveiling, which is, we both did an interview in on WRUU that I think is archived, but Zeely kind of went in on a lot of details about the album. I can't do Zeely's speech justice, but if you listen to that album, it is a lot about like systemic racism and all like what black people experienced and still do experience today. But it's also, Zeely plays cello and sings, and Zeely's a great singer. It's kind of like an Americana, I guess you could say, like blues or country or something. It's that kind of record. I definitely would recommend people check that one out as well. It's a very different record from mine, but I think it makes sense that both of them came out from New Amsterdam Records. So please go check it out, But
how's your record different from what you just described?
Right. So I can speak on the album What Ails You. So What Ails You is... it spans music that I did like pre-pandemic down to like, very recently, and through my time at CalArts and things like that. And I think the label copy says it explores like familial... what's the term?
Relations?
Familial estrangement.
Tensions. Yeah.
Familial estrangement and like reconnection with arts and music and community and things like that. And it's one of those records that is like, it's experimental and it is definitely like dance music based, but it's not the kind of thing that you would play on a dance floor in many ways. Maybe some of it is a little bit. I think you heard the first single, Never Here, which is, it's like a darker track. A lot of the tracks do kind of deal with like darker themes just because of my personal background, but it's also, I think, about, getting out of that side of, getting out of the cult experience and trying to become like a healthier, more, normal, like well-adjusted individual, maybe a little later in life. But it is definitely, if this is like the first time listening to like a dance record or an experimental record, it might be a little hard for people to get it. It's definitely one of those records where I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of expecting people have heard like Flying Lotus, which is like my big influence growing up, but like, Aphex Twin and maybe some noise musicians, some noise rock musicians, some, like Sun, which is SUNN with the O and the 3 close parentheses afterwards, which is like a drone band, right? Maybe some, like Warp Records stuff like Boards of Canada. I harken back to, there's a kind of famous compilation album, I think from the 90s, called Artificial Intelligence, Volume 1, I guess, which has, the album cover is of a robot, like, reclined on a seat, listening to giant speakers, listening to like Kraftwerk and Pink Floyd, and it's like it's a record of dance music, but they call it IDM. But it's like it's not necessarily meant for the dance floor. It's a little headier, Another term, I think Aphex Twin himself liked to call it brain dance. It's like dance music, but it's meant more for like just listening.
Like spacey, tripped out music.
Yeah. Or like, the beats are a little bit more complicated. It's not, it's not meant for the feet, but the feet in your head, a little bit. But I have seen like some reviews of my music call it like, harsh noise with EDM and Pink Floyd. I'm like, I guess you could also hear it that way too. That's understandable. I don't know if I think of my music as being like noisy or industrial, but I do sometimes find that people group my music that way. And, if it's easier for you to associate my music with like Trent Reznor because that's what you're exposed to, that's fine, whatever.
Everyone thinks he's from Cleveland. He's not.
I don't know much about him, but...
Oh. He broke out of here, but he's really from Pennsylvania.
I see. My girlfriend Mary, I think, is kind of from Pennsylvania.
Kind of, yeah. Most of them are.
But yeah, it's I understand the record isn't for everyone, but I think for people who, like maybe they will like it. Maybe you'll like because a number of tracks on that record do kind of sound different. Like the singles, which is Never Here, and then the digital like single is Every Hope, a Dream, a Prayer. Both of those tracks are kind of a little bit more straightforwardly dancier. A bunch of the stuff on the record is also, like, there's drum machines and, like, synthesizers on them, but I wouldn't necessarily say, they're nearly as dancey. But, I don't know, people might like it. It's, honestly, sometimes it's hard for me to evaluate what other people think of my music.
It's sort of impossible for the artist to do what you're talking about. That's been a struggle for almost every artist, I think.
I do think, though, that New Amsterdam does have a policy of like music, releasing music that does kind of cross the borders of genre, right? They call it genre fluid, like genre, thinking of it less in terms of like stylistic restraints and more in terms of lineage, right? Like, what kind of artists are you influenced by? Is it like drone metal guys? Is it like harsh noise guys? Is it industrial? Is it dance stuff? Is it and in my case it comes from all sorts of stuff. Is it classical? Is it jazz, free jazz stuff? But in my head I'm like, well, if people have heard the music that I'm influenced by, if you are that kind of music nerd who's like been keeping up, you should probably get where I'm coming from. But even if you don't, maybe there is something in there for you. I don't know. And Zealy Brown's record as well, I do want to plug, because Zealy's obviously not here, but Zealy's album is it's very beautiful, and it's very Zealy. I've only met Zealy in person once, but
well, with this many plugs, I'm predicting.
Yeah. I really hope people do check out The Apocalypse Is Not the End, but The Unveiling, along with my album, What Ails You. Because, I think it makes sense why they picked Zealy's album as well. We both performed in New York earlier this month. The label actually flew me out, which was very nice of them, but for their end of the year performance. New Amsterdam itself is actually, I'll speak a bit on New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam it's not like a traditional record label. It's like a non-profit organization that has a for-profit label underneath it. It's so it's kind of like I got a grant to release this album. And again, they're not super big. They're they're well regarded in the places that know them, but not everyone knows about them. And I remember when I was doing their the Composers Lab program earlier this year, they were just talking about how the budget, the funding cuts from Donald Trump had cut from the National Endowment of the Arts, and they were losing funding, and it's really tough for them to release new good works. So the politics of today is sort of cutting right in there. So that's certainly not good. I think they do release good work, and they do deserve support, but they do have tight finances, and it was very generous of them to be releasing the records by both Zealy and I. We're not big artists. We don't have big followings. It's these are both digital only releases. It is on Bandcamp. If you do buy music, Bandcamp is a good place to do it.
And Fridays, the artists don't you get all the money on Fridays?
I don't know if it's all Fridays, but in many Fridays,
yeah.
We do get but it is also on streaming as well, and but they definitely went out of their way to give new artists sort of an institutional level of support that maybe we wouldn't usually get otherwise, to sort of get our careers off, so to speak, to get the ball rolling, because it is very difficult. One of the big things I learned about releasing a record is it's hard. It's really, obviously, but actually going through the steps of it and seeing this is how much press you have to do outreach, and it is cool. Both Zealy and I, our albums got covered on NPR's New Music Fridays, which it was on the long list, but it was on there. So that is that's about as mainstream. That is coverage. Your grandma knows about NPR, I'm sure, that kind of thing. But it is hard to get people to hit record on an album, and gosh darn it is hard to make money off releasing a record these days, and certainly to sustain a career. It's coming to terms with the fact that releasing I thought when I was starting to do this, I'll release an album off New Amsterdam. I love some of the New Amsterdam releases. They're great. I know they're not a big record label, but it'll be like, oh, like I'll release this album and I'll have like a functioning career. And of course, that's not how this works. It's like you actually, I saw a post recently on social media where it's like, well, the album is like the tentpole of your career, but in order to actually make things work, you have to like do a billion other things, you know. And also, like, I have to post more on social media if I want to have more people know about the album. And
You got to create the buzz and keep the buzz growing.
You know, short form content on TikTok, you know, and all that stuff. And it's like realizing, yeah, I probably have to do more of that. I haven't been a great poster. I'm sorry, UM, but hopefully, you know, like this interview. I'll be able to do more outreach about the album.
The more people that hear you in any way, you know, and I mean, the advantage to this digital age is that there are so many, basically, free ways. Now, the downside is because there's so many free ways, there's so many choices out there for people to grab. It's in a totally different, economy in the music business than it was before the internet. So
I mean, even sorry if
no
hijacks this a little bit, but my girlfriend and I we were at Nikki Sekar, who works at New Amsterdam, had us at their like apartment, and we had some nice like late night talks. And one of my girlfriend mentioned like using Spotify. Nikki's like, "You use Spotify?" And Nikki was a little
insulted,
scandalized by that one. And it's like, on one, it's one of those weird things. Of course my music is on Spotify, of course New Am music is on Spotify, but it's one of those weird things where it's like, yes, Spotify invests in like AI military technology. The guy running it, Daniel Ek, is like an evil billionaire. Spotify is like ethically horrible, but if you are an artist, especially an up-and-coming artist, if your music isn't on Spotify, it's like you don't exist.
Yep.
And the people who have leverage are large, like extremely large artists. Like if the Beatles or the estate of the Beatles, or if Drake or Taylor Swift want to take their music off Spotify, they could get away with it. But smaller or even medium-sized artists, I know King Lizard and the Gizzard Wizard took their music on Spotify, but that's like a rare case. And even then, they're pretty big, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they got other forms of...
they're big for music junkies.
Exactly.
And the rest of the population...
Exactly, yeah. So, it's a hard sell, and the other group who actually do have leverage on the whole Spotify thing is you, the listener, right? Like if you are a listener and you're like, hey, I could cut my Spotify cable, go look up, whether it's like Quobuzz or whatever, Tidal, I don't know, maybe places that have better sound quality, like look into who owns what. I don't know if Tidal's great or whatever, but it's like, yeah, like those people are in a lot better of a position to be sort of negotiating against Spotify than independent musicians. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like our New Am music is on Spotify, but like Nikki's like, yeah, I mean, if you can avoid using Spotify, it's like it's the paradox of if you're a up and coming or younger early career artist, etc., or just in general, it's like if your Spotify numbers are high, that's a good thing, but as a larger trend, you would rather people not be on Spotify at all. It's a weird thing. But,
sure.
Just getting the word out there for people listening. That's a whole thing.
How do you look at YouTube?
I mean, and YouTube is owned by Google. I don't know. I do watch a lot of YouTube, but I wouldn't necessarily say YouTube is like super like ethical either. I don't know.
Let's just say this. The music business has basically never been ethical.
That's true.
The mob ran the music business on the East Coast, and look at Tommy James and the Shondells and Morris Levy and all those guys. So, I mean...
For sure, but like there are new things these days. Like, for example, like Spotify's cutting, from what I understand, Spotify's cutting like business deals with the major labels when it comes to like AI music and like... Because AI, I mean, I don't know how your listeners feel about it, but it is like a plagiarism machine. That's
It's
what
scary.
It does.
It's scary.
And, it's like there are business deals being cut by major labels and Spotify, and it's like, I know it is part of a long running trend of the music industry to not be ethical, but like, yeah, there is probably no way to consume the whole of recorded music for $15 a month. Like, yeah, sure, but at the same time, no one listens to the entirety of the history of recorded music for every month. I'm sure there are artists that you like, that you support, and if you buy their music on from their website or Bandcamp or whatever, or you buy a T-shirt or something, that's going to be a lot more than however much you stream from them, and it would help artists a lot, especially people who are not super duper big, if you give them that kind of support. Me personally, I never got off iTunes. I still use iTunes. I still have my library of organized music, and I still like to collect music, just like I did back, tying the interview back from before, just like I had with the iPod all those years ago.
Sure.
Putting my music into my library, and a lot of what I like about music is collecting it, listening to it, and making it is also I think tied to that. I think and honestly, I started when I went through the really depressive parts of my life, I listened to less music. I got it into my head that I have to dismiss this kind of music because it's not art music, it's not classical music. It's like no, this stuff is also important too. A lot of it also, the concept of art music is like very marked by topics of race and class, and how that jazz is like led into the world of art music, but that's black people music. A lot of it was dance music at the beginning, and in many ways still is. And there are those restrictions there, and you kind of see where that comes from. But and you can also see how, as I was mentioning before, my dad's racist, right? It would have been easier for me at the time when I internalized my dad's ideas to also internalize these ideas about art music, even though I knew they had like racial and like class implications, because that's the way my dad was, and it'd be like I had less of a resistance to those kinds of things, I think, at the time because of my dad. And it's like that music is important, and caring about the music and learning more about it and listening to artists, and if I can buy their records on Bandcamp or whatever, like that's I don't know, I think it's important as a both a creator of music and as a fan of music and as a listener.
What's been the best thing that's happened since you issued your album?
What's the best thing that's happened to
Musically, ignore the girlfriend part.
No, it's been very cool for New Amsterdam to like fly me out and perform at their end of the year event, with friends of the label and donors and stuff like that. But I think just the whole idea of it, like putting it out and like actually putting my music out, it's very easy, at least it has been in the past, very easy for me to be like in my head, like, oh, the music I'm making is, maybe I'll tell myself that it's great or whatever, but it's a whole different thing to actually bring it into reality and being like, okay, well, here's my record. This many people listen to it, and this many people listen to the single because it was on the NPR and the ASCAP playlists, and this many people actually might have listened to the real record. It's like actually like facing the reality of stuff, because especially as someone who is like a bedroom producer, it's so easy to kind of just be caught up in my own little world, both aesthetically and also just like in terms of the actual creation of it, and actually like opening the door and putting that stuff out there and actually engaging with the world. I think that is I think that's important, and hopefully if you're listening to this interview, you might want to check it out, and maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't, but that's, I think, part of the process, right?
It's worth a shot, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, let's hope some of the old geezers that are fans of my channel, and I don't mean to scare you, but 68% of my viewers are over the age of 60. It's so I don't want to delude you that we're going to ram the sales door open for you here.
It's okay. And make sure to check out Zeely's record as well. I wonder if Seeley's album will cater more towards that crowd. But
Yeah, we've got a lot of the alt country kind of vibe going through. So
I will say, dance music is old now. You know, it's been around for a while, and you know, it's always been about experimentation and doing new stuff, and you know, people appreciate it. I think at least some people will. Hopefully, you know, out there maybe.
well, the fact that you got people that are willing to help you put it out and promote it says a lot. I mean, that doesn't happen unless you got something going on. So, you know, take assurance and that what you went through in your life that inspired you to do this is hopefully going to yield some at least positive emotional returns, you know.
Yeah, but you know, like sometimes, especially as the promotion process goes on, it can be easy to sort of focus in on like the numbers and all that stuff. But when I was at CalArts, someone had told me, because I'd done like an art installation of like live performing techno, like code, like computer code running on the walls and things like that, and people could like interact with it and hit buttons and turn on effects. And someone had told me that was like their first time seeing like an art installation at CalArts, and it like really like made them motivated. Sure. And it like meant a lot to them. And it's like, wow, that means a lot, you know. And but you know, you can't always see that in numbers. You know, like how do people feel about work when it's like, well, you know, that could be one play, one, you know, whatever. But yeah, I think it's important not to be maybe me or other people or whatever, not to be bogged down by like the numbers. And it's like, yeah, maybe even if it reaches one other person, that's a good thing, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for investing the time with us, and I again hope that it opens up a door or two to you. And you know, worst case scenario, it was interesting for me to hear your story. So
once again, may I plug the albums?
Yes.
Essvus, that's ESSVUS, that's ESSVUS, that's my artist name. Essvus, What Ails You, and Zeelie Brown, that's ZEELIE Brown, ZEELIE Brown, with The Apocalypse Is Not the End, but The Unveiling, both out on New Amsterdam Records, digitally, wherever you get your records, out now.
Thank you. You said that slow enough the geezers will understand it.
Thank you very much.